Welcome back, Ross the Wars. It's episode 2 in terms of our mock draft, our mock NFL draft, not fantasy orientated. Yeah, we've got our usuals, our steady eddies, our Mike and the London Legion, and Ross and Latvia Unicorns. We filmed these back-to-back episodes just to make sure they get out sooner rather than later, so we can just go through a full set of 32. Where we left you at the end of the last episode, we had picked the first 16, the first sort of half of our mock draft, getting down to the Saints pick at 16 with Drake London. Obviously, we went through in depth quite a lot of the picks and why each individual sort of wanted to pick those players for those certain teams. I'm sure it's going to be a bit more interesting as we get sort of a little bit thinner, a few people off the board, and a few more options for these teams, and obviously stronger teams as well. The teams at the back end of the first round, obviously teams that got quite far in the season and in the playoffs. So these are teams ready to go, and let's see if any of these talents will be those tipping little extra bits of edge that help the team sort of get to the holy ground. Mike, Ross, I know we got through the first 16 pretty quickly and pretty easily, but I think without further ado, let's sort of just kick straight back in, and we're off to pick 17, the LA Chargers. Ross, where let's start with you here. What are you thinking at 17?
So I've got a few different places I can go, especially with the board falling like this. But I think I'm going to go offensive tackle, Trevor Penning out of Northern Iowa. Now, I'm personally not a big fan of this guy. I think he's all talk. He's got a name for himself about being a nasty player, strong in the run game, but this is purely from a positional standpoint. The Chargers definitely need someone on the other side to block for Justin Herbert. I think it's Storm Norton that was there last year, was just like a turnstile. But with the pick last year, of Slater really working out, if they can double it up and get a good right tackle this year, then that will be protecting Justin Herbert for the next 10 years, and that's exactly what they want to go for.
Yeah, look, I think that's a pretty good pick. Obviously, I think they took Rashawn Slater last year, yeah. And he's obviously been a great pick for them. And I think I'm sure with the same scouts, they'll obviously do their due diligence. And although Trevor Penning does have a bit of a bad rep or something that he likes to brag about to a certain extent, I think it is a good pick. If I am honest as a Saints man, I'm sort of kicking myself now because I was hoping he would fall to 19. Anyway, Mike, on to pick 18, the Eagles. Where are we going?
So, judging how they pick wide receivers every year, and you've just taken a cornerback at 15, it's going wide receiver. So I think this is where I think Garrett Wilson will go in. I think he'll. They love a wide receiver. They love a wide receiver in the first round. I think another place to collect quarterback, but I think the wide receiver makes more sense with what they've got. And I think Garrett Wilson's the guy here. He's fallen down from what others thought would be a much higher position. He's the best wide receiver on the board left, I think, at this stage. I think he fits in well to how the Eagles want to be. I mean, they've got a young guy at quarterback they want to give him more weapons to. So this could be the guy who unlocks him.
Yeah, no, I sort of I do like that pick. What are your thoughts there, Ross?
Yeah, I think the Eagles will be sprinting to the podium to get this one in if he falls this far. And like you mentioned with the pick at 15, I think it's because there was a couple of wide receivers there that may fall to them. And this is like the zone where all the wide receivers go as well. So they really need to get this one in now before there's a massive run.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. So, yeah, a couple of minutes ago with Trevor Penning on the board, I thought he was coming to the Saints. I'm sort of kicking myself a little bit because in hindsight, I should have looked at taking him at 16 and then waiting and hoping that Drake London or Garrett Wilson fell to me at 19. It's making me change my strategy slightly here. I really wanted to go offensive tackle because having lost Armstead, I really think that we are slightly exposed there. However, the next best tackle I see on the board is Bernard Raymond, who I think is he's the international foreign exchange student from Austria, who's a bit older. With not much talent, he's obviously got incredible talent, but he's just not that caliber that I think the Saints were looking for. Because of how things have changed, I'm going to be slightly controversial here, and I'm going to take Desmond Ridder at pick 19. I like Ridder. He's someone that I do think is explosive. I wasn't going to go quarterback. I always thought starting the draft that the Saints will go offensive line and they'll go wide receiver. But having seen all the tackles go, I'm going to go Desmond Ridder. I think he's got a higher ceiling than someone like Pickett. I do like Kenny Pickett as well, but I'm going to go Desmond Ridder and not look back and hope that he gets some reps with Jameis and they battle it out there, or we can sit the season behind Jameis and Ridder can sort of learn and become change the way of that offense that the Saints are looking. Ross, your reactions?
I like it. Like you said, with the board falling this way, I think it is a good pick, and that he's one of the more safe. He's safer, but he does have a decently high ceiling at the same time. He's won a lot of games in college, and that tends to translate well to the NFL. If you look at Mac Jones, Deshaun Watson, obviously he's not quite at the heights of those players, but winning games and important games and college level seems to translate well. And like you said, he's a good athlete. He didn't quite show it as much on the field, but he did show it in the combine. And I think the Saints will definitely be open to it. Yeah,
Mike, do you any thoughts on the Ridder pick? Is he the next quarterback for you? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. He's a safer option than Pickett. Pickett's got more airtime in the recent weeks, but I think he makes more sense. Like he's got a slightly higher ceiling. I think he's probably a safer pair of hands. He's likely to get airtime in New Orleans this year because it seemed like last year they were QB5 or QB6 by the time they finished the season off. Anyone walking past the stadium given a quarterback shirt to go and play at one point. So I think, it makes sense. Is Winston the long-term answer? No. Red Rifle? No. So, yeah, why not? If you said the guys you wanted to go for, the linemen, they're not there, take the player you want.
Yeah, I think look, the fact that we're only focusing on sort of the first round, I'm sure in the later rounds we'll try sort of hit on tackle, but yeah, it was a shame that Penning didn't drop to us at 19, but I think Ridder is the best option here for the Saints. Anyway, let me forget about this pick and move on. Ross, at 20, where are we going with the Steelers?
Yeah, I love this board here. There's a lot of, this feels like the meat of the draft. There's a lot of good players that I wouldn't mind picking for the Steelers, but I'm going to go for the guard or interior lineman. He's a bit versatile, is Zion Johnson out of Boston College. They obviously need to get better along the line. It was decimated over the last couple of seasons, and they looked to last year run the ball well with Najee Harris, and getting Johnson in there, it will just help that. And obviously with Trubisky as a quarterback, you're maybe not looking to throw the ball a lot. And if you are, protecting them at the same time. So I think they'll look to do this. And Johnson himself is a really good player. He's versatile. He can play all along the line in a pinch. And he's sort of risen up after having a really solid Senior Bowl, I think.
Yeah, I think it's a good pick. I think he was definitely one that I was considering in the last episode for the Vikings, sort of on the front there. But yeah, I think he can only help the Steelers and help Najee Harris and just take a little bit of pressure off Mitch Trubisky, I feel. Mike, the Patriots, where are we going?
So, with his history of drafting wide receivers, he goes wide receiver. He's picked a few not so good wide receivers over the years, but I think with the way that Mac Jones has come out the year one, I think they want to add more weapons for him. Obviously, they've traded for Devontae Parker, so I think they need to add a bit of youth here. So I think they go Treylon Burks at this point. I think he shows a lot of ability to learn. I think from what I've been sort of reading. So whether or not he fits into the Patriots' way is another story. But I think it'd be interesting to see. I think they go that. I think Bill still re-signs Van Noy and some of the other senior players on the defensive side of the ball. So I think he looks to add youth on the offensive side.
Yeah, Ross, what's your reaction here?
Yeah, he's a great player, and I think obviously the hoodoo with the Patriots drafting wide receivers might be broken if they select Burks. He's a really good player. He's really good with the ball in his hands, but I think people knock him for his route running, as the Americans would say. But I think that's overrated somewhat, as long as you can get separation. And he does that with his athleticism and just explosiveness. So I think I would be upset if the Patriots picked him. He's a good player.
Yeah, no, going on to the 22nd pick now here with the Packers, I'm
Special teams. I'm
kicking myself for not trading up. I think I was looking at Treylon Burks there, and I was ready to hit draft on Treylon Burks. The fact that he's off the board now has really got me again in a bit of a pickle here. I'm having an absolute nightmare on the back 16 here. There are quite a few very talented players that I feel justified getting picked at the 22 ahead of some of maybe the receivers I want to avoid reaching for. I'm going to go on the defensive side here, and I'm going to go with Nakobe Dean from Georgia at linebacker. The linebacker from Georgia. I wanted receiver. I was hoping Burks would fall one more pick. He didn't. I'm not going to reach for another receiver. I hate speaking on behalf of the Packers, but I sort of have to do for argument's sake. But I do have one of the better quarterbacks, obviously, with Rodgers. I've lost Devontae Adams, but I still have arguably the best, or at least the MVP from last year. So wide receivers will get open. I want the defensive side to hold up its end of the bargain here and keep teams from scoring points. I like Nakobe Dean. I think he's a long-term talent. He's explosive, big guy, makes tackles. I think that's the right sort of pick at 22. Ross, what's your reaction?
Yeah, like you said, I think you would have them picking a wide receiver, but the right one's just not fell to you here. And because they've got 2 picks in the first round, they may be able to pick one up later. And obviously they've been really good at picking second and third round wide receivers historically. So Dean's a good player. I think he's played at a high level. Georgia, he was a leader on the Georgia defense as well. So I think he's almost got a really high floor to the next step in the NFL.
Yeah. Just as you made that pick, someone has slammed their phone down, stormed out the room, and asked for a trade. He's not very happy now. You've got rid of my number one receiver, and you're drafting linebackers. What are you doing?
Yeah, it'll be tough to keep Aaron Rodgers. I'm sure he'll hold out until the start of the season. He'll be fine. Ross, 23, Cardinals. Where we go?
Yeah, so couple different options here, but I think the defense was pretty good last season, definitely to start the year. And now that they've lost Chandler Jones, I think they need to replace that. So what I'm going to go with is I'm going to go with Boye Mafe. It's an edge defender out of Minnesota. He's one of my favourite players. I'm saying he's one of my favourite players again, but one of my favourite edge defenders. I think he's really explosive. He's really quick. He's got a good first step, and I think the Cardinals, to be successful, they need to have a good defense, because Kyler Murray, I'm not going to get into that, but I think he's a good replacement for Chandler Jones. Big shoes to fill, but I think he can do it. Yeah,
I like the pick. I think it's the right thing there to obviously replace or at least try pick up the slack that someone like Chandler Jones will leave. I think they're very explosive on offense. I think it's a good pick on the depth side there. Dem boys, Mike, the Cowboys, what are they doing?
Well, O-line, I think it's their biggest problem at the moment. They've lost a few of the big stalwart names over the last few years. So I think you're looking at Kenyon Green as the guy. I think they're going to look to fill this spot. Also, Texas A&M, he's a local boy. I think these are the kind of things that these guys look at. I think he's the guy they will look to plug in here to fit straight into the O-line, which has been one of their assets for many seasons. So they seem to draft pretty well at that area. So I think it's something to look at. They've got other issues that they're trying to fill up with. There's the free agency, but obviously they're handcuffed by certain contracts. So I think the O-line's where they've got to beef that up, because these guys can get paid some big bucks going forward. So get them in early, train them up, and get them into that system. I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, look, I think all of us are becoming, as we said in the last episode, massive offensive line experts. But the main expert here, Ross, what are your thoughts on Kenyon Green?
Well, I think the Cowboys have made a couple of splashy picks the last draft that have just fell to them, so Parsons and Lamb. But the real way they built up their team and won a lot of games was through the offensive line, and obviously that's been hit very hard this off-season, if not last couple. So getting back to interior is a really good way of adding wins to your team. I think is a no-brainer pick that the Cowboys will likely make come drafting.
Yeah, no. Absolutely.
I was actually quite happy he was still on the board at that point. So I thought all the way along, I thought if he gets to that level, he's there with them. They'll snap him up straight away, especially in a Texas A&M boy as well. They kind of they level the local boys and all this sort of stuff. So.
No, I agree. Now on to the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, very unlucky last season. Obviously, the rules have now changed for overtime because of obviously the Bills' heartbreak. The Bills are very sort of their team that are pretty complete. Look, I think this 25 pick could go a lot of ways. I don't think there are any huge gaping holes in that team. I think the offensive line's pretty steady. Their defense is looking good. I think with Josh Allen, they've got a runner there. I could easily see them going running back here like a Breece Hall or whoever, but I think that's a bit of a stretch for now. So I'm going to be a boring GM. I'm going to say we win this in the trenches. I'm going to go Devontae Wyatt, defensive interior from Georgia, and I just want more big boys trying to flatten out in the trenches. He's 6'3", 304-pound senior. He's obviously done well at Georgia. That defense, that Bulldogs defense, has been something quite special to watch over the last season. And I think it transfers well for the Bills there. Just adding more ammunition on the defensive side. Ross, do you have a reaction to that pick?
Yeah, really I think it's something the Bills will do as well. You don't see many holes on the roster in general, so they have the luxury of picking just the best player. And I think Wyatt falling here is brilliant for them. They've got a couple of edge defenders that they like to rotate, and they've got Ed Oliver as well in the middle, and Wyatt will slot right in next to them, and it'll just be fearsome. And like I said, it's trying to combat all these new wide receivers in the AFC East. I think getting to the quarterback and knocking him on his bum is definitely the way the Bills will like to go about things. Yeah,
I think the AFC as well. The AFC has become so pass rush intensive now on the defense. I think you have to get after quarterbacks, and I think Devontae Wyatt is one of the players there that I think he's a pretty elite pass rusher, or at least that's what I've sort of read. When I've sort of seen sort of some of his scouting write-ups. The Titans, Ross, a few needs possibly. Where are you thinking here for the Titan lads?
Yeah, I think this is one of the players I quite like. I'm going to pick Sky Moore, wide receiver out of Western Michigan. I think they need wide receiver help. They've just paid, or they're about to pay, AJ Brown. I don't think there's a question that he's going to stay on the Titans. They've just paid Robert Woods as well, who's got a decent sized contract, who they traded for. So they need someone cheap and young to come through. And obviously, as we've seen last year, when they had a couple of injuries to that position, they were starting guys like Nick Westbrook-Akini, who I've never heard of before last year. And they really need some depth there. And I think Sky Moore's a guy I really like. He's a really strong route runner, but I think for his size, he's got a lot of physicality, and I think he'll match the sort of physicality that the Titans offense need.
Of course, they've lost Julio Jones, or currently lost Julio Jones as well, so it's a good replacement going for that, to add more weapons.
Yeah, I'd argue they didn't really lose him. He didn't really contribute much last year,
Well,
did he?
yeah, but he still was supposed to contribute. He didn't, but that's not the point.
No, exactly. I think, look, I think it's the right pick. I think AJ Brown needs help there. There are not that many offensive weapons in that team. That team did incredibly well. I think I stand to be corrected, but I'm pretty sure they're the AFC #1 seed.
Yeah.
And they didn't have Henry for the last 6-7 games. They had hardly any receivers other than Brown. They did something right, clearly. I think it obviously helped being in that sort of AFC South division, playing teams that just kept capitulating, like the Colts and the Jags, etc. But at the same time, I think they are lacking sort of offensive specialists and actually game winning players, really. Mike, the Buccaneers, pick 27.
Pick 27 with the Bucks. So I think the biggest question at the moment is, what is Gronk doing? If Gronk is getting any signs he's coming back, I think they concentrate on where they need it. If Gronk's not coming back, they might have to address this later on in the draft. So I think a reach at tight end 20 at 27 anyway. But I don't quite know. But I think Todd Bowles will look more defensively anyway. I think they've lost. Well, JPP's currently not signed back onto them, so they need to look at some more sort of pass rush. I think George Kalafidis, the Greek freak, will be the guy in here. I think he'll good. Yeah, opposite Shaq Barrett, I think he's probably a good addition. From what I saw a little bit of tape of him this morning, he looks very good off the edge. Also, slightly with some big names in there. He'll probably see a little bit more airtime as well, where they'll be following some of the bigger name players like Shaq Barrett. So you might see more hits and more opportunities in that sort of side.
Yeah, he's a real standout, and I'm actually honestly quite surprised he's fallen this low. I think he could be at least a top 25 pick. Could carry Laftis, or however I want to pronounce his surname. But look, if I'm just reading.
Yeah, I probably destroyed his name when I picked him. Sorry.
I'm just reading like a very short extract here about him, but it says a versatile Iron Man who can do almost anything a team could ask of him. He played at least 49 snaps in all but one game this past season and finished with a 90.6 PFF pass rushing grade. I think it's a great pick. I think it's a very good pick for the Bucks. I think JPP has played his best footballs behind him, and I think what the Bucks need to help Tom Brady is again on the defensive side. I think that's where they were a bit slightly lacking last year, and that's where the games that they did lose was more on the defensive side as opposed to Brady not really turning up. I don't know. What are your thoughts there, Ross?
Yeah, I think with the way the board fell, Karlaftis fallen is a good pick for them. I think they're a bit unfortunate with Kenyon Green and Devontae Wyatt going just before them. I'm sure they would have been in consideration as well. But
I was looking at them at that point. It was like as they're disappearing, you go, right, okay, where right, that's down the value. This is the as much as the O line's great, they kept the centre, they kept a few other players, but yeah, it's where you are and what you pick. I mean, obviously we haven't looked at any people trading up in draft at the moment, so obviously you'll get some people pulling triggers and jumping up position, like the first wide receiver, everyone comes flying in to try and take the next pick. We keep it as it is. So I think that's kind of the best way for me as a where he was. Sorry, interrupted you.
No, that's it. And I think Todd Bowles obviously loves edge rushers and blitzing and getting after the quarterback. And I think pairing up him with Joe Tryon, who they took in the first round last year, who they're hoping to make another step, then they'll have the two young edge rushers coming through for when JPP's old and useless and Shaq Barrett's getting paid too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. Okay, I'm back with the cheeseheads. The Packers, they're not giving me respite here. I have to go.
Don't think you need a quarterback now because Aaron Rodgers has asked for a trade.
I was about to say Kenny Pickett is still there, and I'm very tempted to go Kenny Pickett. He'd be a great backup to Jordan Love as the number one. But I'm going to go with what I possibly should have looked at 22, but I'm glad he's still there. And he was the wide receiver I wanted back then. And I'm going to take a gamble on this kid who obviously tore his ACL last spring, George Pickens from Georgia. I'm a big fan of his. I think he's an exceptional talent. It is a gamble coming off this injury. But I think there's enough about him and in the right setup and in the right team, I think he could be one that really really has a chance to break out and stand out. Ross, on the wide receiver side, what are your thoughts on Pickens and his injury? Do you think he can come back from it?
Yeah, ACL seem to be no big deal nowadays with modern technology. But for me, I'm just unimpressed by George Pickens personally. But I can definitely see him getting picked late in the first round. There's just something about him that I don't quite like. I can't put my finger on it. It's probably completely irrational, but I won't be picking him up in any of my fantasy drafts, even if he does go to this spot. But he is definitely, like you said, he had a great freshman season, and he does have that potential to hit some heights higher than a lot of the other receivers in this draft class. And Packers need one, and I think he can definitely be picked in the last half of this first round.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ross,
I think they get past 28. They're not drafting a wide receiver. There'll be all hell breaking loose inside that building. Yeah,
yeah. There weren't. There were a few other options, but I don't know. From the rest, I felt Pickens is the only one with real first round upside. But anyway, let's Ross. I'm going to give you both these Chiefs picks. I'm sure that, who knows, that they will look at trading them. But if we are in this parallel universe where you're not allowed to trade anymore when the draft starts, Ross, what are the Chiefs doing here? Pick 29 and 30.
So pick 29, I think I'll start with, because that's it's before 30. So obviously I'm going to start with that. But it's a no-brainer for me. Is Trent McDuffie, cornerback out of Washington, and I think he's fallen a lot further than I would have thought, and maybe than he will do in the real NFL draft. He's a great player. He might even be picked in the top 15, depending on how teams feel about him. He hits really hard as well, which is great to see for a cornerback. I think the Chiefs really need help covering a lot of the receivers that are now in the AFC West as well. So he'll definitely help. So that's pick 29. With pick 30, I'm tempted to go safety and just double up on the defensive backs. But I'm looking at a player here, Jahan Dotson, who I think will definitely help sort of make up for the lost Tyreek Hill. You can't do it with one person, but if you look at who they've got since losing Tyreek Hill, they've got Juju. Now, if they pick up Jahan Dotson, that will definitely help ease the load on Travis Kelce, who's getting a bit old to getting 300 targets a season. So yeah, that's cornerback and wide receiver for the Chiefs.
Yeah, nice. No, nice. I think I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not surprised that they look at wide receiver there. I'm surprised they haven't been slightly more aggressive on some of the free agent wide receivers. But they've obviously picked up Juju, and obviously looking at a few other options there.
Also on the free agency wise, that they've let one superstar wide receiver go because he wanted too much money, and everyone else, their money just jumped up. So as soon as Hill went, they probably knew most of their chances that these top end wide receivers was gone.
Yeah,
you can't let Hill walk at 75 million or whatever it was again, then try and pick up someone on the cheap, Adams or whatever, to it resets the market. So they must have. When you pick the quarterback first, I thought you've got to go and wide receiver that second pick, because you've got to start filling that gap in. So that made a lot of sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mike, your last pick of this mock draft that we put together here for the Bengals at 31.
So Super Bowl finalists, you've got most of that. They've done a lot of work on the O-line, and it's often, which is what I think they're one of their biggest weak points from last season. I think you basically take the best player from the board. I think this is the kind of the area you're in now, and I think Devin Lloyd at linebacker, I think, will fit in very nicely in what they've got there. There's other options at corner and safety, but I think he's the guy that will fit in quite nicely into their system. They've got quite a nice defense set up, so I think his skill set, from what I've seen, will fit in nicely with what they've currently got. He may not be the flashes of picks, they probably want wide receivers or whatever, but they've got a very good offensive system currently. So I think you keep that side, keep that ticking, and then you add to the defensive side.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good pick. Ross?
Yeah, so he's a great player, and I think if I'd have him higher on my player rankings, but I can't quite seem to find a fit for him when I'm doing mock drafts, the thousands that I do. And so picking him as the best player available is the great. And like you said, this is the teams around this area are picking here for a reason. It's because they've got decent rosters already, so they've got the luxury to do that. And Devin Lloyd's like a mini Micah Parsons, and that he can rush the passer, be a linebacker. He's good in coverage as well, so he can do it all.
Yeah, no, I agree. On to the last pick here for the Lions now, obviously getting the Rams first round pick here, 32. I was sort of hoping that Devin Lloyd would fall to this 30 pick 32, because I definitely would have taken him there, but you've taken that decision out of my hand. So what I'm going to do is we've obviously, with the second pick, they took Thibodeau on the edge. I'm going to go quarterback, and I'm going to go Kenny Pickett to the Lions. I'm surprised. I wouldn't say I'm surprised he's fallen to 32. I wouldn't be surprised if he moves into the second round. But the fact that the Saints went Desmond Ridder at 19 allowed Kenny Pickett to sort of fall a bit further. And I think Kenny Pickett's a great pick there at 32 for the Lions. Look, they've got a lot of areas to fill, but I think from what we saw at the end of last season, it does look like Dan Campbell's really sort of at least adding a bit more sort of team chemistry in the building there, where the defense are playing for him, the players are playing for him. There's a lot more emotion involved there now. Look, you do have Goff on a few more years, but at the same time, Kenny Pickett can learn from Goff here. There's no rush for Kenny Pickett to start from day one, even though he's a late first-round pick. And if he is the talent that is perceived of him, he could well transition into that starting role in the next year or two with the full rebuild of the Lions. Ross, do you think the Lions might go quarterback if the right guy falls to them at 32?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they've got pick 33 as well. And the beauty of taking them at pick 32 is they've got the fifth-year option. So if they are looking to sit him for a year and use Jared Goff, then they've got that extra year on the contract. And I think if they like someone, then they're absolutely going to do it, because, like I said, they need help at the position, and just hope that he becomes something. I think Pickett is being touted as like a safe player, and he's got a high floor. He had one really good season at Pitt, and I'm sure the Lions will be looking to recreate that if they can.
Yeah, Mike, any sort of thoughts there as well at quarterback?
I think it makes total sense. It's 34 they've got, not 32. But
right, yeah.
You do. If Pickett is still there at 32, you take him because you've got that fifth-year option. As I said, Goff's not the guy, but I think picking some of these QBs at 2 and 3 was just a bit of a reach this year. If someone comes in and wants to take the second pick from them, they'll happily go to 8 and 10 and take a quarterback then. But I think it makes a lot of sense what they're doing on that basis. There's QB needed teams behind as well. So you got the Giants aren't far behind, the Texans aren't far behind. So if these guys drop into the second round, then they'll start looking at taking some of these QBs that are there. So I think Pickett at 32 makes sense.
Yeah, look, I think if you look at the 32 players that we've covered in our mock draft, obviously the last episode and this episode, I think I would like to think the vast majority of them will be first-round talents. If you do sort of look through some of the players still remaining on the board, they're definitely options as well. But I think it's been. Yeah, obviously us trying to be as accurate as possible. Luck can change, a lot of trades can still happen. Are there any sort of closing sort of comments that you have here, Ross, on any of the picks you made or that we made? Any serious steals or any sort of people that really need to perform to sort of make value for their picks, especially in the second half of the draft that we've done this episode?
Yeah, I think this is the area of the draft where everyone says there's lots of steals because there's so many talented players and they fall. And these are the teams, like we've mentioned earlier, who can just go best player available. So I'm looking at one of the picks I made, Trent McDuffie. Yeah. I think he's going to be picked in the top 15, and we've got him so late on. Devin Lloyd as well, who has a chance to go high based on his talent. But like I said, there might not be a spot to slot him anywhere. So I think this is sort of the like I said, the meat of the draft, the back half, where there's a lot of good players and a lot of choice for the teams picking.
Yeah, because quite frankly, the top 11 picks, you could probably argue about 4 different positions for most of the teams picking, really.
Yeah.
Just look, none of them have got anyone. Well, apart from probably tight end at the Falcons, none of them really got anyone that's completely tied in as the next starter for the next 10 years at that team. So I think there's a lot of options we could, like you said, every time we do a mock draft, it changes, right? So we could do this again tomorrow and have some completely different players coming out.
Yeah, and then multiple teams with multiple first-round picks, which I think to me is slightly unusual as well. And whether those multiple picks are used now to leverage themselves to move up the draft to take the guy that they really, really want, or whether they use to even trade back with some of the teams. Look, there are a lot of options, but as you point out quite clearly there, Mike, which I agree is the first 10, 15 picks there, or at least the first half of the draft. A lot of teams have got a lot of holes in a lot of positions, and any of those players could sort of interchange within each other, as well as a lot of those players that we've picked in the back end, in the second half of the second 16, could well find themselves further up the draft. But yeah, I think, look, guys, it's been a great little test for us the last 2 episodes, sort of doing our own mock draft. I'm sure there are many trades to change. It'll be interesting to see our sort of success percentage in terms of how many of these actually get taken in the first round. I'm sure we'll sort of notify and sort of keep that posted and up to date. I'm sure we'll talk about a more fantasy orientated mock draft closer to the season, and maybe even a review at that stage. But I think it's been a very useful exercise for us all to sort of just bounce off each other ideas wise and see what teams think there. Any sort of closing comments from either of you guys before we sort of sign off?
I think fantasy wise, it shows it's a big IDP year. There's not a lot of offensive talent going that first 32 pick, so it'd be good to sort of see how it's when we go to do our draft in August, or when we get around to doing ours, where some of these guys actually fall. Whether we go as defensive as the real NFL, or we go offensive and start taking the QBs early on. I guess it'll be quite fun to see later on.
Yeah. Looking at thinking at a fantasy angle as well. If you look at the Chiefs and the Packers picking a wide receiver, they'll be well sought after. There'll be a lot of discussions if those 2 teams pick a wide receiver as well, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the big thing, obviously, is that running back position. I think everyone's quite clear that Breece Hall is, or at least I'm under the impression that Breece Hall is the number 1 RB. But he could end up on any of those teams really towards the end or later half of that mock draft.
So the Chiefs are another one that could take a running back. Yeah, this adds bolsters their side, so it'll be interesting to see what that does.
Yeah, no, exactly. But look, guys, it's been another quality pod from us. Another good episode. I've enjoyed the last 2, the mock draft, and I think you guys have as well. And I'm sure we'll be stinging out and putting out another episode shortly on the RFA or anything else to come. But thanks again for your guys' time, and I hope everyone has a good long weekend, a good Easter long weekend. Thanks, guys.
You too.
Cheers. Bye.
See ya. Bye.
Cheers.